Welcome to Canada's podcast. Hey everyone, I'm Phil Bliss, founder of Canada's podcast. Today we're going to meet Peyton Nyquist. Peyton is the CEO and founder of Numinus Wellness, a leading integrated mental health care company providing psychedelic-assisted therapies. Numinus Wellness is a leading integrated mental health care company with 13 wellness clinics across North America, 4 clinical research sites, and a bioanalytical research lab. Numinus recently announced the launch of its new Numinus Network Wellness Clinic licensing platform. So Peyton, welcome to Canada's podcast. Great to meet you. Nice to see you in Toronto and spending some time here. And as I usually do, why don't you tell everyone about yourself, what you do, why I'm interviewing you, how you got here, that kind of stuff, because I think it's a great place to start.
Sure, sounds good. So I'm Peyton Nyquist, and I'm the founder and CEO of Numinus Wellness, which is a integrated mental health care company, which at its core is helping support not just research, but access to psychedelic therapy, which over the last number of years has seen a huge amount of interest. People call it the psychedelic renaissance, which is really being validated by a lot of clinical studies that have been done over really kind of spearheaded by MAPS over the last 36 years, has been taking MDMA through clinical trials. They've recently completed their phase 3B, which for people who don't know, MDMA for post-traumatic stress disorder. And those studies were for people with treatment-resistant PTSD. And the results were over 80% of participants saw a significant clinical reduction in their symptoms. And 67% actually no longer met the PTSD criteria after just 3 treatments. So really, a paradigm-changing result in regards to how we think about treating mental health care. For myself, I have a capital markets background. I was with Canaccord in Canada for about 6 years, left Canaccord, and was part of a group that bought a control position in a smaller independent brokerage firm called Jordan Capital. And then after a couple of years, we sold Jordan to Mackey Research, and I was the head of their West Coast offices and a director of the Cross Canada firm. I sat on the advisory committee for the TSX. But my pathway into the psychedelic space really came from my own personal experience. I'm someone who had suffered with severe chronic pain since birth, and grew up in a household that suffered with substance abuse. And my mom got sober when I was 12 and came home and said, you might want to start talking to somebody. And I took that pretty seriously because of my chronic pain issues. And that kind of led me on this kind of really deep excavation and exploration of mental health, physical health. And that really stuck with me throughout my whole life. And what was interesting as I got older, the severity of my symptoms seemed to be directly correlated with my professional success. In fact, the most successful week of my whole life, I spent that whole life in the hospital. And I remember thinking, if this is what, success is supposed to be, then I'll do something else. But after, really trying everything and towards the end of that journey, I was ending up in the hospital about 3 days a week, was really out of options. And I'd never had a psychedelic experience before because I grew up in a household that struggled with substance abuse. I was always sort of the anti-recreational drug person, but because I felt very out of options, turned to psychedelic therapy as really a last ditch to try and save my life. And not to paint the picture of a panacea, but 1 week with psychedelic therapy, and I never had any chronic pain symptoms ever again. And that led me to in the beginning, really just trying to figure out how I could give back to something that saved my life. I never planned on quitting my job and starting a company and doing everything that we've done. But as I looked more and more at the research and ways that I could, potentially support, there was just a really glaring recognition that, while the clinical research that was being done was extremely important, there was a real lack of access to psychedelic therapy. And that still kind of exists today. Since 2017, there's been $2.9 billion that have gone into kind of psychedelic related industry activity. But less than 5% of that money has gone into infrastructure. And, we're now at a place where access is really opening up, and the need for infrastructure is even more apparent now than ever before. So that's kind of a little bit of myself and where we are today.
Okay. I mean, you grew up in the investment side of the business, and we were talking earlier about, it wasn't somewhere where you thought you would be coming back to. I think, you saw an opportunity at Numinus because of your own crossover on, with health problems and things like that. Why go the capital route? I mean, it's because it's an interesting, it's many entrepreneurs are, if they're successful or if they need more investment, it's thrown up at them. And maybe it's, I hear varied stories about it being the right way, the wrong way. I've done both ways in terms of, private or public. What's your perspective on it for, people that might be in the same boat as you, kind of thing?
Yeah, I think, maybe regardless of industry, I think for people who are looking at whether they want to take their company public or stay private, running a public company is a whole business in itself. And, I spent more time when I was on the investment side. I probably spent more time convincing people not to take their company public than to take their company public. It can seem like attractive or lucrative. There's a romanticism to, being a public company and, ringing the bell and all those kinds of things. But it's an expensive endeavor. And it takes a lot of focus and energy. And not only that, but, there's also this kind of misconception that, the public markets is where, maybe some interesting or nefarious activity can happen or what have you. But I think, the public markets also present the opportunity to you actually legally have to give full disclosure. And so, for us, a couple of the reasons why we went public, one, the psychedelic industry grew and evolved far faster than I anticipated that it was going to. And the access to capital at much higher valuations was extremely great. We ended up raising just over $80 million, have had a market cap as high as a couple $100 million Canadian as well, at a time where that industry was extremely nascent. And so it just presented an opportunity to raise that kind of capital, and then be able to go and build, again, at a time where, we're kind of far and away the closest to a profitable psychedelic company, but it's still early days. And we still need there's a significant amount of building that still needs to happen. But yeah, for entrepreneurs who are debating, whether to take their company public or to stay private, my big recommendation is to fully understand not just the costs of being a public company, but the time commitment that it really, really takes to be successful as a public company. And entrepreneurs are always exposed to the highs and the lows of running an entrepreneurial business. I would say that's kind of 10x when you're at the whims of the capital markets and the public markets as well. So it takes a certain amount of intestinal fortitude, I would say, to steer a company through the public markets as well.
What do you like most about being an entrepreneur versus being an investment guy?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say what we're doing, I'm extremely passionate about, and obviously from my own personal connection to it, that for me is extremely important. When I was on the investment side, it was interesting. You're providing capital and ultimately the resources for companies to grow and operate their business, but you didn't really have much, and I tried to position myself so that I could have some kind of influence or supporting the company more than just investment. But it's kind of this passive, it's a passive sort of commitment to an organization. And being an entrepreneur and again, in particular, in something that I'm extremely passionate about, there's no shortage of motivation to get out of bed every morning and go to work. So I think that for me is exciting. And I think, we're at this kind of interesting, I think, especially coming out of COVID, there's a lot of entrepreneurs that, they want to do something that is meaningful. They want to do something that maybe has some purpose attached to it. And they, want to be able to build a life for themselves as well. And I don't think that those need to be kind of mutually exclusive. I think there's this kind of old paradigm of, if you're going to be financially successful, then you can't do something that does good in the world as well. And I think I don't think that's correct. And so that's something that I get very excited about. And I think we're in a time of entrepreneurship that really supports both.
So what's the greatest challenge you've faced in the business to date? There's always lots of challenges, but what's the biggest one you've had to kind of jump over, if you like?
Yeah, the mental health care system is a huge system. And unfortunately, when we think about mental health care, it doesn't matter what you're looking at, whether it's anxiety, depression, suicidality, substance abuse. These are all rates that are going up. And, we believe that not just psychedelic therapy, but new forms of mental health care can greatly shift that paradigm. But it's a huge undertaking, and it can feel like, and I think I was sharing just before we got on, last quarter, we served about 20,000 people, which, feels incredible. And it's still just a drop in the bucket at the moment. And so I think the challenge can be, there's so much to do and there's so many places to focus on. But, you have also being very conscious of resources, really getting very focused and on what it is that you want to contribute to and staying focused on that before you start chasing, too many shiny balls. And I think this is probably something a lot of entrepreneurs struggle with, is you have this grand vision and idea, and how you execute that in the most efficient way possible as you're building your business takes a lot of focus. And especially, we've experienced this a lot in the psychedelic space, where there's been moments of huge investment and excitement and volition to the marketplace. You can get caught up in all of that momentum and sometimes maybe lose sight of what it is that your business is really contributing to doing. And so I think that's probably one of the, maybe not challenging, but definitely something that takes the most amount of focus and energy is to keep the company really on track.
I was going to say, with those challenges, how do you typically handle them? Focus is obviously part of it. Any other things that we that we sort of should pass on?
Listening to your team. I mean, yeah, your people are always your most important asset in an organization, and making sure that you're coming together with the team that you've created to to take that collective wisdom on how to move forward, and make sure that you're engaging your team in that too. Entrepreneurship can be a little bit of a lonely path at times, and so remembering to lean on your team, if you have advisors, who are your sort of key stakeholders, and really, getting a good consensus, bounce things off people, and never underestimate, frankly, how much I think at times, especially when things are challenging, can feel like there's not a lot of support out there. But in my experience, more often than not, there's no shortage of people who are willing to give some time or advice, even for free. And, I encourage people to continue to really pick up the phone and reach out to people.
The advice thing is interesting. I mean, I think we've all got mentors, whatever. I have a couple of things that stay with me all the time. What's the best piece of advice that you've ever received that you kind of keep in your back pocket and it's there when you need it, kind of thing?
Yeah. I wish I could just. I would say, for me, I have the opportunity to really understand what our client needs because I've been there before. And I had a mentor to me remind me of that one time, when there was a lot of hype and excitement, and it felt like there was a lot of shiny ball chasing. And he said, don't forget what you would have needed when you were in that position. And so, I think a lot of people who are entrepreneurs have some personal connection to the thing that they're creating. And for me, when I'm in those moments of trying to make difficult decisions, I really try and put my shoes on of the person who, ultimately we're trying to serve. And every time that's kind of been a very good guiding stone for me.
Now, you came into this market, if you like, with a passion because of your own, personal health issues and things like that. But if you weren't doing what you were doing now, what would you be doing instead? I don't think it's going back into the capital markets, but what would you be doing instead?
It's a very good question. I naively got into the capital market space because I thought that was going to be my way to help people. I wasn't smart enough to be a doctor or any of those kinds of things. And so, when I was 18, I said, well, maybe I'll help people with their finances. And I very quickly realized that helping people make more money definitely doesn't make them happier. And so, I think I've always been very passionate about, ways that I could be in service to people. And I would say that, the thing I probably have the most experience in is healthcare, and in particular mental health care. So probably something in that space.
I liked your progression. I thought it was getting into this based on your background was good. Simple question. A morning or a night person?
I'm definitely a morning person. I mean, I grew up on the West Coast, and in the public markets on the West Coast, if you're not a morning person, you're in trouble. But I'm definitely a morning person.
What book are you currently reading, listening to? What I don't really care, but what kind of knowledge are you currently kind of into, or have read recently that you think someone should pick up and read, kind of thing?
Yeah. I usually have at least 2 or 3 books on the go at any given time. I'm a bit of a knowledge digester. But there's a couple of books I make a point to pick up at least, every couple of years. And for me, The Alchemist is always on that. I try and read The Alchemist at least once a year. If anybody hasn't read that book, it's really, really good. Yeah.
What's keeping you up at night?
Well, I have a 2.5-year-old daughter and another one on the way. So that keeps
fantastic.
Me up. that keeps me up most nights. But I think the thing that probably keeps me up at night, honestly, the most from an entrepreneurial perspective is, it's a double-edged sword, being very passionate about something that you've also made your profession. And, while that can really help with drive and motivation, it's also hard. I find it's hard at times to kind of turn it off. And because I have so much passion and personal interest in this space. So I find myself at times, there's the hamster can be running on the wheel for quite a while. But again, grateful for it.
So what advice would you give someone who, moving into a new business, following a passion, whatever, that might be useful for them? Obviously that could be a long list, but 1 or 2 things that you think are really you have to cover, kind of thing.
Yeah. First one, and this will be cliche, but find people that, share the same passion that you do, that you want to work alongside with, and lean on those people. Those are the people that are there for you when times are tough, and equally when times are good, keep you grounded and on track as well. I can't understate the importance of a good team enough. And the other thing I would say is, for people who are starting a new business, and in particular, if you're in, maybe a new industry or a nascent industry, don't forget to trust your gut on things as well. I think we can get caught up in, getting the opinions of a lot of people and kind of maybe contradictory to what I said before, but, get advice and input and listen and receive all of that. But at the end of the day, you're there for a reason. And so, as you're moving through and making decisions, trust your gut and trust your intuition and lean into it. Don't take a kind of passive approach to trusting your intuition. If you're going to trust your intuition to make a decision, really stand into it. And, that kind of authenticity and passion and vulnerability is what makes your team passionate and really, really lean in. And so those are definitely two big things that I think of anybody who's looking to get on the entrepreneurial path.
So if you had to pick one word to describe Peyton Nyquist, what would it be? And why would you choose that word?
I would say passionate, and again, I would say there's a double-edged sword to that too. But I would say, we've as Numinous as an organization, we've experienced great moments of success, great moments of challenge, but we've never lost sight or lost passion for what we're doing. And that passion for myself is really, as I said, it supports when times are good, and it supports when times are challenging as well. And I think we need I think we need a lot more of that in the entrepreneurial and business world as well.
That's great. Peyton, we're coming to the end of our session here. How can people get a hold of you if they listen to this? Happens all the time. People want to get a hold of. They never want to get a hold of me. They always want to get. That's about it. How can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, you can go to our website, numinous.com, or on social media channels, and myself personally, it's my first and last name on all the major social media channels.
Okay. Thanks for coming on Canada's podcast. It's been great meeting you, and I'm going to watch where you're going with the company. I think that's really, really good.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me on.